What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the Hackin' Hippie here, and we're back with episode 75 of the video game therapy series. I actually recorded this entire episode yesterday, and OBS kind of glitched out on me, which it's the first time in a long time it's happened. It actually used to happen all the time when I would run Windows. It was like 1 in every 20 recordings, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you record a lot, 1 in 20 is pretty good. But 1 in 20, it would just freeze and crash, and then the outputting file is corrupted. I'm still actually working on repairing the outputted file. I just won't ever post it. But anyway, this is, I guess, part 2 of episode 75. But Jared, back. It's been a little while. I guess there's certain days that not only do I not feel articulate, but I feel particularly cynical, and while I like to be honest, and sometimes that, that leads towards a sort of a cynical-ish take. And I don't want to actively kind of perpetuate a black pill ideology in my videos. So sometimes I'll choose to abstain if I'm in a certain mood, especially if I'm having trouble putting my thoughts together. Because it's one thing to, I don't know, have a cynical take on something. There's another thing to describe it in an inarticulate way. So there's a certain combination of which those I will just avoid doing, just for everyone's sake. Not that anyone cares, but I don't know. I guess you're welcome. So anyway, yeah, we're back. Some interesting things to talk about today. The first of which is kind of what I guess refer to colloquially as the irreversibility, or the seemingly irreversibility of modern societal systems. Like, even, and maybe it's just a function of culture, or just, I don't know, perhaps just not being around that long. I suppose if I was 60 or something, I'd have a different view on this. But it just appears that over time, since I think in general systems, and I'm using the word systems here pretty broadly, but I'm mostly referring to social, political, and like manufacturing, technological systems. They've all grown in size and complexity, and as well as like interdependence. I've spoken at that quite at length. We're almost just one big congealed mass versus these separate, sovereign entities. But with everything being all just this one big blob, it feels, systems in place feel very, very irreversible. Like, it's almost inconceivable for me to dream up of something on par with the American Revolution. At this time, not only because the world has like been explored, right? I guess short of me looking for an island somewhere, there's no new land to conquer, right? I suppose unless you could go underwater or something, like, there's a lot of unexplored territory there, but it's not as easy as like, and I realize I'm trivializing like a difficult journey across the Atlantic Ocean, but regardless, I think there's some comparable difference between a voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas versus a voyage undersea in a submarine, which I can't. You're not selling tickets to a submarine anywhere that you can go and explore, and even then you couldn't live in that unless there's Atlantis down there. You can't live in a fucking underwater. So anyway, there's not really land to conquer. So something on par with the American Revolution, which was seen as this freedom from tyranny, and of course, again, it depends on your skew with what will happen there. But which of course I would agree. I'd be on the side of the revolutionaries. Obviously wouldn't be defending Britain's actions. But something like that just seems so inconceivable in modern time and modern place. I mean, even like something on a fraction of that scale just seems laughably impossible. And I don't know, again, whether that's a function of my naivety and just not having seen, I'm certain there are conflicts in the next, whenever World War III rolls around, it'll be pretty big. Like, it's not going to be like some little, weak guessing. It'll be a big deal. But regardless, it just feels like the level of influence that either an individual or a small group can have is just been dwindling to the point where it doesn't feel, systems in place feel so cemented that, it's, you're almost spent more time wondering if it's even worth, worth bothering to challenge something like that. So I suppose it might be easier to be specific. So, people propose alternatives to, a capitalist system or this free market system or, whatever. Again, you could kind of plug and play the different options here. But, even just conceivably implementing something that is not, I guess, that capitalist system just seems like insane, right? And like no one can really argue with like the practicality aspect of it because it seems so impractical. So I guess the metaphor that I'll use to think about this, it's a silly ass metaphor, but I used it in the last video and it just came to me, and I feel like to be true to the lost media of the last video, I should keep the metaphor. So I'm going to. But when we're born, we're not asked to be born. So when you're born, whatever the thing is, the systems and the culture and everything that is given to you is kind of like you're gifted a fish, right? And it's generally like the fish is good, right? Like we built on top of the language, we built on top of the mathematics. We, in general, our current systems, whether they're good or bad, regardless, they have been built on top of centuries of development. So it's not like to be truly free, you'd have to like not use a language you were given, and like obviously it is just impossible. Like, so you're given a fish, and the fish kind of represents holistically the entire congealed set of configurations that you were given at birth or whatever. And to a certain extent, you have to, your life is spent, you have to you have to keep the fish alive. You have to develop the fish, and now at this point it's a pretty big fish, pretty big fish bowl, right? Perhaps you can make minor adjustments, like, but you can't question the fish. I mean, it's like this is just it's too big to fail kind of thinking. Not really too big to fail, but too big to change almost, which I think is what is perhaps what the underlying threat is kind of to people. It's just, it seems so, and whether or not you like having the fish and care for the fish, you've been given the fish, and in that way that this newest generation has inherited the earth. Be it all the systems, the factories, like everything that exists. Now, whether or not you own it doesn't really matter, but we inherited we've inherited the system. So, but, at a certain point, you're spending much time, like, caring for and, I guess making sure the fish is okay, that you don't ever really get to ponder deeply about what, whether or not the fish is, not that the fish is worth keeping alive, but it's just so big now. It weighs so heavily on our time and our life and our, of course I'm always the pro autonomy person, but on our autonomy that it begins to feel, I think some people, I'm not necessarily putting myself in this camp outright, but some people are frustrated that they have no other option other than just to care for this big fish. And we didn't ask for the fish, we didn't want the fish, and maybe some people will hate the fish, right? And again, the fish can be representative of anything that is modified, but it's a fair criticism, I think. Now, of course, there's, again, the pragmatist would just go, well, you can't. What else are you supposed to do? All we ever known is a fish, and the fish works for the most part, or And again, the fish is a really stupid example in this regard, but hopefully you can see the parallel with what I'm talking about, which is we inherit in the world, and it's kind of this blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing that we have, infrastructure. We don't have, you don't have to crawl out of the room and start foraging for worms or something to survive. We have, generally speaking, you'll have some parent that'll take care of you, or some caregiver, or some, and if not, you're just going to die, and then, I guess, sorry, the fish ate you or whatever. But regardless, most of the time it's there's a lot of blessings that come with inheriting the fish. But at a certain point, the fish begins to loom larger than, the human, the you, right? So it's like at what point, what's more important at that point, like the system or the individual? And I think we're so far past like the individual having precedence over the system. I mean, the system swallows up, individuals. I mean, we like, if you think about something like, you know, there's a balance between like, the speed limit and like car accidents, right? Or something, even just cars in general, like using cars. Like cars kill a shit ton of people every year, but no one is ever considering like not using cars, right? People are willing, and again, it's people don't like to say this, but they're willing to sacrifice human lives, in exchange for using cars in the aggregate, right? Because if you wanted all car deaths to stop, you'd have to stop using cars. It's not possible. So same with like the speed limit. I think they would know like data wise that, oh, if we set the speed limit to 55 versus 60, we're expecting that many more human lives, people to die because of speeding or whatever. And of course, I don't know the exact numbers. You could crunch numbers, but regardless, the higher the speed limit, the more people are going to die. And some people are happy saying, okay, well, I don't care if the percentage of people dying on this road goes up by 0.02%, or maybe it's 10 people over the course of a year or something like that. They're willing to do that, really, in exchange for what amounts to a minor inconvenience. And so we've already kind of vindicated this, from an absolute perspective, human life for convenience in some sense. Among other things, convenience isn't obviously the only thing that we've vindicated human life for, but, the most trivial of which can be convenience, right? Something like using cars and stuff like that is a very blatant example of how we've traded, and people are fine with that. And I'm not saying I'm not either. I'm just saying we're already letting the fish eat a certain amount of people. So it seems equally dumb to kind of go out on this limb of, well, we have to predict like even one human life is worth like this ultimate, like at a certain point people will say it's not worth it. And same with like even this is kind of a bad example, but people would say, well, how much is a human life worth? People are like, oh, it's invaluable, right? And of course, if it's your mom or somebody that you care about, you're going to say it's invaluable, and you obviously wouldn't put a price tag on it. But there are plenty of settings and plenty of ways in which, like, even insurance companies, they like, you're worth a certain amount of money to an insurance company. Even organ by organ, you're worth a certain amount of money. So it's not like there is a value of the human life, and people don't, whether you should or not. There's not an infinite like value. The value curve on a human is not infinite. At a certain point, maybe $200,000 or $500,000 or whatever, you're worth less than that. So they will just kill you and take the money. Now, it's obviously not directly, but, again, metaphorically, they would, on paper, that's what it's worth. So I don't know. It's an interesting, but the reason I want to talk about it is because it felt like there's a, I don't know, a lot of the systems at play feel so large and big that they're, anything on par with any kind of, not that I'm a revolutionary in any way, or advocating for some kind of revolution. I'm not. I'm just thinking it just seems incomprehensible at the scale of modern systems. And systems I use ubiquitously. I don't specify exactly what kind, but it's, I don't know. I don't even know what the solution ideation or what developments are from that, but part of it's even the challenge of, even let's say, suppose you want to make a change, you need to, change the water in the fishbowl, or clean the fishbowl, or exchange the tree, or clean his fin or something. I don't know. Again, metaphorically, the fish kind of falls apart at some point. Kind of a terrible, inheriting the fish. But you don't even know where to start, right? And it's almost incomprehensible for a single person to have a realistic understanding of where to start because the systems are so complex. And I talked about that a little bit with like politicians, and because I'm obviously critical of everybody in that field, but I'm not as critical only because it's kind of ridiculous to assume that they're supposed to have any kind of understanding of all of it, because you can easily shame them for not knowing what an internet browser is or anything like that, which it seems laughable, and they probably should, but you're tasking them with like more than it is capable of the human brain, even to understand things at a high level, because there's also like the whole like problem of understanding things at a high like general level can make you susceptible to like very blatant and obvious, it's like if you know a little, like enough to be dangerous. So it's like you almost rather than know nothing and not reach that level to like knowledge to be dangerous, because there are like, I don't know, an infinite number of examples in contexts in which enough knowledge to be dangerous truly is very, very dangerous. Like you'd be literally better off knowing nothing. And especially because people generally aren't quick to like admit their ignorance. That's not seen as a good thing. which I think is a mistake, because people aren't quick to, say, okay, well, I just don't know. They have to answer something, and then they end up with some boneheaded answer, and it just becomes a mess. So given the fact that people are not willing to admit their, ignorances, which shouldn't be a vice, but it is, I guess. Couple that with the fact that they might know enough to be dangerous is dangerous. It can result in, I guess, some pretty poor consequences. But I don't know. Suppose nothing I can do about that. But regardless, I just wanted to note on the irreversible systems. So I mentioned in passing a few times that I started this written blog. Of course, if I didn't have enough mediums to get my shit posting thoughts out into the ether, I now have a written blog. I had more reasons to write other than to just have a blog, because I wrote the framework and stuff myself, so it's a kind of a programming labor of love too. But regardless, I using this as an excuse to talk about Markdown, which has grown and is become my favorite, one of my favorite file types. So if you don't know, like .txt is like a text document. I'm sure everyone's seen those before. Like docx is the Word, post 2007 Microsoft Word extension or whatever. But .md is .markdown, and Markdown is incredibly simple, and I love it just because it gives you, like, you don't have with docx and all these other, we have all this like all this like syntax sugar crap, and Markdown is really just text with plus a bit more like rich text. So it's like it's text, but you get italices, you get bold, you can put like block quotes, code snippets, and then like headers, and I'm sure you can do like lists, and numbered lists are like on there too. But outside of that, you have no other formatting options, which it might sound bad. Like, oh, don't you want like, yellow highlighted or orange highlighted or blue font or like margins? Don't you want to fuck with the margin? Like, it's not for like PDF printing out shit. Like, I think there's files, there's like file types for that, like LaTeX and stuff like that. But especially if you're just writing like text documents or just writing text, I spent way too much time in my life dicking around with the margining on Microsoft Word's bullshit, or and Markdown is just so simple. And I'm thinking, especially for like something like a blog, if I can't describe what I'm saying in Markdown form, if I need orange text and blue underlines to get my point across, I need to think about it more. I need to be more articulate in what the fuck I'm saying, because it's like I refuse to believe that you need that to communicate your idea in written form. And so Markdown is almost like a purposefully neutering yourself to be simple and concise and direct in how you are portraying your idea. And I think .text is a little limited only because I like the ability to italicize or to bolden things just gives me enough spice, enough flavor to be able to, I don't know, I guess get sarcasm through the screen sometimes, or just to emphasize something that I've spent more time thinking about than others. But regardless, I just love the format because it's simple, right? There's no extra bullshit, right? Especially even with just like speed. I mean, it's literally text with, even if it didn't work, like let's say, something doesn't render in Markdown properly or whatever, which most everything does. Even if it's just text, it still renders, like it's still readable, right? Versus if like a docx is converted to a text, it'll be a bunch of gibberish because it has to codify the margins and the blue font and all those other, the emojis you put on there. I don't need emojis to get my point across. And if I do, I don't have a point, I don't think. So I love the simplicity of Markdown. If and my axiom is that if I'm not able to articulate my ideas in Markdown format, the idea is not worth sharing, or it's just not digested enough, right? It's too much into its raw constituent parts. So I don't know. Especially when things are getting so complicated now, everywhere software is so complicated, the world is so complicated. It just seems it seems smart and good to, I guess just good at some moral level to simplify things. And that's what Markdown is. It's simple. So I feel like I should be edging towards that side of the continuum when I can, right? Just because in general, this huge world we live in tends to complicate things more than it does simplify them. So if I'm able to simplify things, I think I should. So that's what I've done with my blog. Maybe I'll like a separate video just promoting the blog, because it's distributed via RSS now. It's not even, I'm not gonna put it on any other platform, I don't think. But yeah, I write it in Markdown, and then it gets parsed into HTML using these Rust scripts. That was part of the reason I wanted to do it in the first place, because I wanted to learn Rust. So it is written in Rust, and the code's available if you want to hack it, but it's very stupid. And it's also terminal based too. That's the other thing with Markdown, is that I don't have to leave a terminal. I can just do it all from the terminal, which is the other benefit of it, right? DocX, you can't edit. You probably could. I'm sure somebody's done that, but it just seems so stupid, to edit a fucking docx file or something, or a PDF or something in from the terminal. So I don't know. I love Markdown. I just think it's great, and more people should be like me and like Markdown. So I don't know. Anyway, I'll move on to something else here. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's something else that is obnoxious to me. So if it's not clear enough already, I suppose I'll emphasize it again. I'm not a fan of, I guess, very traditional media, and maybe that's not a great way of putting it, because I like sports and other like episodic content. Like I think Rick and Morty's fun, South Park's fun. Like these are The Office is a good. I like their show because it's very episodic. It's not so plot. I think what I don't like is what I call serialized drama, and it just feels, and this is just maybe me being strange, but it just feels controlling, right? It's, oh, be sad now, be happy now, be sad now. It's like, and they just use the cinematic, the cinematography to make me feel a certain way about everything, and it seems to cut things like very cut and dry and leave it less interpretive. And I don't mean to make to advocate for art being more interpretive, such that it's like esoteric and nobody gets it. I just think it's I don't need it. Not everything needs to be a superhero movie where it's like a bad guy, good guy, bad guy, good guy. I think there should be. It's more interesting if there's a bit of a gray area, and it's possible that you could sympathize with the bad guy. But the thing is, if you don't allow me to sympathize with the bad guy in this movie, if you put all of his epilogues are in these haunting the deep dark organs in the background, and there's like he's wearing all black, hooded figure, like they use all the cinematic effects and settings to obviously paint this person as a dickhead, right? Whereas I feel like in the world it's never like that, right? Even the guys like that I would rip on all the time, these people at Wall Street, even movies that showcase them are all these like pricks doing cocaine or whatever, and a lot of them, like I'm sure in most scenarios, just at home with their wife or with their kids, they're just normal people, but they don't look evil. So it's not like you can just sniff out evil like a bloodhound or something. It's normally always in this big gray area. And I think, I guess Hollywood, or like, for lack of a better word, always portraying the bad people or the good people or the happy people or sad people. It's just this black and white, like totally like cut and dry ideas. It just seems lazy, and again, it seems like it's forcing a certain way on me. Even not even just bad and good, but like attitudes of happiness or sadness, right? It's like it's never unclear whether or not this character's happy or sad, right? It's always just like, okay, this person's obviously like they're playing the jangly fucking music, and the person's crying, laughing. I was like, so all this other bullshit. It's never like this kind of stoic, like you're not really sure what the response is, which I think is more interpretive, and I think this maybe just, I don't know, more interesting. And maybe there is lots of media out there that is more interpretive that I just don't find, but I'm not actively seeking it either. I just think I just hate the serialized drama. Like everything feels like a fucking Marvel movie when I watch it, and it just feels controlling, right? Be happy, be sad, be happy, be sad. It just seems, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. So, I don't know. I don't really have a point beyond that. I just I guess, boot for serialized drama. So that's really my only point with it. But yeah. Anyway, just wanted to touch on that. So let's see. Um, yeah, I mentioned this very briefly in one of my recent blog posts, but I was thinking about this. Um, I don't know, this the desire for power. A lot of people, it's natural to, I think, desire power in your life, and power, I'm going to put in quotes. I really think it is. It's naturally, when you're born into the world, whatever configurations you're given, it's easy to feel, as I put, under leveraged, meaning that you feel like at any point, the world could, you know, just destroy you or whatever. And this could be like society. This could be like, the big lawyers, big government, big business or whatever, like whatever. You're kind of at the whims of everybody but yourself. So you don't really have a choice in what, you're screwed if people don't like you. So, through one way or the other, you try to obtain leverage. And for a lot of people, this is, you know, like money or power, or in some ways even just being like invisible. Obscurity is a form of leverage. Like, you can't really get mad or, bring down the reins of terror of your legal team on somebody who you don't even know exists. So obscurity is one other method of leverage that I think is possible, and it's perhaps just by default. But other people, like, the sociopathic success type, pursue this. They kind of compensate from this lack of leverage by trying to be very, very powerful and having, whatever. And ultimately, I don't know. Perhaps the issue is that if the world wants to swallow you up and spit you out, it will, because it eventually will kick you anyway. Like, you can fight all you want, but eventually you're gonna die. So I don't mean to to say that as like to kill yourself or whatever. I just mean eventually, like, as much as you might want to obtain leverage, and maybe it's just social leverage that they're scared of, or that is driving them, meaning that, like, they don't want to get be at the whims of a big company or a big whoever, or the politicians or whoever, to just to take their life away from them at any point, because ultimately they could, right? I think if, like, some gajillionaire, Donald Trump or something, decided that he wanted, for some random reason, I don't know why he'd ever do this, but suppose he wanted to make an enemy of me and then, and teach me a lesson or whatever. I'm sure he could have me killed. He just has that kind of power, or, and fill in the blank. It's not just him. I'm sure it's anyone with any amount of money or legal power could silence and just banish me, and I have no recourse, right? I could sit here and talk about, oh, I have rights, and no, you don't. At a certain point, if you become enough of an enemy, these rights they melt away. They're gone, right? Especially go to any third world country or an authoritarian country, you have no rights. Okay, you're done. Even, who cares? Especially, your only right is if you have power, you have influence over. So that's why I don't totally fault people who spend their whole life, I guess. I mean, I do fault them, but I understand. I sympathize why they would spend their whole life trying to obtain leverage, right? Because it's so easy to, I guess, worry about just being swallowed up by that. Of course, we inevitably get swallowed up by the universe, but regardless, I guess in the material world, it is still easy to be frightened of other people. So I guess in lieu of, I guess getting swallowed up or being under leverage in that case, I don't know, I think there's different ways of dealing with that reality of it. And so I don't know what the right way is either. I certainly don't think it's worth, I guess, sacrificing your whole life to try and protect your life, because at a certain point, if you're, if you're, I guess, spending all time at work, you have no time to live. So I guess that speaks more about what you do with your time and things. But regardless, I kind of take a passive approach with this, which goes against a lot of my other, axioms. Generally, I'm more of an active person on things, but it's something like this where it's kind of the world versus you. And I'm not saying that, you could, actually, I am saying you're not going to defeat the world as an individual, and it just doesn't matter, especially as the systems grow. It's not worth, like, living a life in fear. And I think that maybe that was my point with it, is that The people that are driven by this like lack of this, they want to obtain leverage at all costs, are scared, right? And I'm not scared. El Chapo wants to kill me or whatever. They decide I'm a threat. They can kill me. Congratulations. I don't know what you get out of that. And sure, it's not fair, and that's fine. And the world's not fair anyway. So I guess glad you're learning that now. But I refuse to live a life in fear just because I'm under leveraged. And I think that's really my whole point with it, is that the people that are so dead set on trying to obtain, leverage through money or property, and there's all different forms of this. I'm not saying it's just these millionaire, billionaire types who are, running for office that are trying this. There's all kinds of people trying to obtain leverage in different ways. And I think no matter how much you will try to fight, like the universe will eventually throw you, and maybe society throws you first, but who cares, right? It's like, I'm not gonna, I'd rather live on my feet than die on my knees, kind of thinking. Or yeah, or no, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Sorry, fucked up that quote, but you know what I mean. That's kind of the point of it. Anyway, I don't know. I just was, because I was trying to get into the headspace of, I don't know, your typical VC New York investor crypto bro, all about money and the grind or whatever. I'm trying to understand like what the point of that is, and I realize that there's some draw on like the material trappings of it, but I was trying to even just exit that. And so I landed on this idea of leverage being a possible motive for why they would bother with shit like this. And I think it kind of makes sense. I think if it's a little frightening to think at any point, if for any reason things go awry, or even something just losing your job or whatever, it's easy to just feel terrified in every sense, and then they're doing everything to protect that. But in many ways, that manifests itself as a life lived in fear, which is it's not something I want for myself, and it's not something I think other people want, whether they want to admit it or not. So I don't know. That was just kind of my opinion on that as an aside, but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I guess speaking of this, actually this is not related at all. So at one point I caught myself saying that I was repulsed by the ordinary, and I guess I want to clarify too that I think if we speak about ordinary or average as aggregate means or medians of sorts, given, I'm talking about of people, right? The average person, or the average, I guess the average statistic of a person. In the aggregate, all of those, you are an average person. Given enough metrics of measurement, you eventually will become an average person. It doesn't matter, sure, maybe you might be above average in terms of, height, weight, wealth, I don't even know. You could, again, ad nauseum, whatever your favorite things are, but in the aggregate, you will eventually become average. What about factoring in, toenail growth length, or hair color, or, size of your eyeballs? Like I said, given enough things we measure, you will eventually regress to the average. And sure, maybe if we decide, okay, well, these are, we don't want to factor in toenail length. Let's just speak about 100 high level demographic, or maybe not demographic, controllable factors. Okay, we'll do wealth, weight, mile time or something. I don't know. You could pick whatever the hell you want. It doesn't really matter. At that point, you could say at a certain point that you are above average, or you are extraordinary. And I guess extraordinary, I don't mean that as a genius level. I just mean you're abnormal. You're not normal. But also within normal, there's a certain amount of abnormalities. It's your average person is not average in literally every way. They're an average, there's a normal amount of non-average within their average, or there's normal amount of abnormalities within their normalness. So really, to be normal is to not be average. It's to be above average and below average in things that eventually make you normal, which I think everybody is. So technically everybody is a normal person. So yeah, it's a very, very confusing way of framing the ordinary. But suppose even that I think I think at a certain point, in a lot of ways, I advocate to be not normal in your Like I don't think it's noble to drive to obsess over what is ultimately the ordinary. I think obsession with the ordinary is kind of a repulsive longing. Like I don't know why you'd want to be average on things. So it's not that, like, I'm not saying if you were, above average, you should, it's like, I don't know, the way I look at it is if you were born above average in height or something, it's like, desiring to be normal would be to wish that you were shorter, such that you were, even if you were born short, you desired to be taller because you'd be more towards the average. I think all of that is kind of a farce, and especially for things that you can't control, it just seems like a waste of time to even think about. But even suppose for the things that you can control, like, I don't know, I guess you can control your wealth or the number of cars you own, or again, whatever. I don't know, a certain amount of that is I also think is also kind of is repulsive in what, like a regression to the mean. Like suppose you own a below average number of cars. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's really dependent on what it is that the person is striving towards, because there are certainly things that I think are noble, but in general, I think a desire to be normal is generally the wrong direction to go. Like if you're trying to become more average in some way, even if like you're trying to regress back to like if you're below average and you're trying to get back to up to normal, I still think it is not. I guess it really depends on what you're doing. If it's like a skill-based thing, I guess it's fine. But either way, especially if it's for things that are material, I don't view it as a fruitful usage of your time, or just even your efforts, really. So I don't know. I on one hand, I am just repulsed by this, not the ordinary in an abstract sense, but the desire to be ordinary. And it's like, why? It just like to live to be as average and as forgettable as possible shouldn't be the goal. Now, again, granted, it's kind of, it never really ends, because you are eventually, I mean, again, given enough metrics, you are average, you are normal, and no amount of you trying to be abnormal will change that. But I still think a desire for the abnormal should be in your best interest, whatever that might be. I'm not saying to, like, want to be the person who's done the most drugs. I'm not saying that to do that in an extreme that is to an unhealthy. I mean, again, choosing something that is constructive and desiring to be abnormal in that regard is good. So I don't know. I view a lot of I don't know why my game keeps pausing. I view a lot of efforts in people's lives towards a ends of being in the mean as I don't know, as kind of a flawed exercise. So I don't know. That's really all I wanted to mention. I'll move on to something else. I think I had more to say on that last time, but like I said, this is round 2 of recording this, so I guess I lost my point there. But I don't know. It is what it is. I'll move on. Let's see. Yeah, here's another, I guess, pseudo interesting idea. So I talked before about I guess socialization and its impact, and that doesn't mean that, like, it's not you talking to people or you like going out with friends. I mean socialization as in a conformity with social society's rules and their things, and the rules I'm putting in quotes. So I wonder if left to our own devices, I suppose we'd be closest to chimpanzees with save any kind of socialization. But I wonder what removal of that in many ways would result in society, meaning that because we don't socialize dogs or bears or something. Like they are animals through and through. And granted, we too are animals through and through. So I'm not making an argument otherwise. And again, maybe it's because we're closest in nature to chimps. We would act like chimps, but chimps also murder in cold blood other chimps. So it's not like I'm saying that wouldn't happen. because it totally would with no socialization. But I even mean, what about, let's suppose we provide let's see, language as like a basis, but like we try to remove as much ethical code from the socialization process as possible. Um, and I just the reason I say ethical code is because I think like socializing a person by adding mathematics to their repertoire or by adding language or written speech, I don't think is a. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think the potential, at least in terms of limiting human ingenuity and freedom, would be to impose ethical constraints. Now, granted, I would assume that given understanding of language and even perhaps of history and I guess time on to ruminate, I would wager that most humans would arrive at a similar ethical boundary. Like it's not like I don't think people would be very, very quick to adopt this like, oh, murder, let's all just like, I think with enough thought and enough understanding of human history and beyond, that it would do that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm making the wrong point here about socialization because I don't view it as all bad, but I think especially if we want to explore new ideas, and maybe a lot of these are on these gray ethical qualms or even just these philosophical ideas. We can't, socialization becomes a barrier that otherwise doesn't exist, or is an artificial barrier that we've created. Need more bone meal. That's what I mean. I keep running back and forth. But it can become a barrier to things, especially for thoughts outside of this Overton window. Which the Overton window is like it's a colloquial term for the accepted range of values, and that this kind of changes and shifts and moves in certain directions across history. But really, it's just ideas that seem crazy or out there or heretical or just outside the Overton window is just one way of looking at it. Because at one point, these even normal ideas by our standards seem crazy, and the framing for that is the Overton window. So, for example, like at one point, slavery just seemed like a very normal part of the human condition. There wasn't like all these ethical qualms like there would be today, because it was inside the Overton window. It was outside this idea of like freedom for people as an outright, as a human right was a crazy idea. To us it seems stupid like that. How is that a radical idea? But at one point it was. So I guess I'm trying to challenge more of that, and I wonder if there's, especially as systems grow and perhaps ideologies congeal at the same rate as systems, which again is its own hypothesis. But I wonder if, I guess, removing socialization to the extent we have it now would result in more free-thinking ideas that might seem radical, but ultimately would lead us better. Because I don't think anyone would argue that freeing, abolishing this idea of human slavery, that was a radical idea, but it's a good idea. And so certainly there are ideas now that are seen as radical that are still good ideas. And I think that is where my big hitch with socialization comes in, is that people view because it's a radical idea now, it must be bad, which just seems stupid, because historically there have always been ideas that are radical but are just not bad. I don't think anyone is sitting here should be making an argument for slavery, because abolishing it is a good thing. But again, that was a heretical idea at one point. I guess I think that we've matured past that. I think is perhaps where I would, perhaps where there would be argument. I think people maybe they're just thinking too highly of themselves and how enlightened they are now. But I still think that there are maybe not ideas on par with that level, but there are ideas that seem equally crazy now that are simply not able to be not accepted, and due in large part to socialization and our acceptance of crazy ideas. So I don't know. I never try to turn down ideas only because I'm aware of that inbuilt bias. Not to say that I'm not critical of ideas, which I'm critical of many ideas, and perhaps I'm critical of the wrong ideas too. That's fine. But I still think, not criticizing them for their insanity. I wouldn't say that this idea is crazy because it's crazy. I would say the idea is crazy because of XYZ practical concern, which is is the big difference, I think. And as I don't know, I guess what I'm emphasizing with this lack of socialization. So I'd be curious to see what kind of creatures humans would become if we, I don't know, or if we just did more to de-emphasize that element of societal indoctrination. But I don't know. I suppose that'll be a topic for another time. But anyway, so speaking of artificial boundaries, I was thinking about this later. Really, all boundaries are artificial. Like even, I mean, especially moral boundaries that we've created, they're all artificial. I don't think anyone would argue with that in like a absolute sense, but certainly that doesn't mean that they're not practical. Right? There are plenty of artificial boundaries that are practical, and I think the difficult part there is deciding, I guess, where to draw yourself. But saying something is a boundary because it is an accepted boundary is not. It's kind of weak justification, right? It's like it's even like maybe it's most it's easiest to see like within the area of the law. Like sure, like laws by themselves are arbitrary boundaries, but you wouldn't argue that all laws are useless. There are certainly a lot that are useful, but there's also not just because something is a law doesn't mean that it's like automatically right. I mean, there are dozens of laws that are beyond stupid, or and sure you could try and there's not really a way of dissecting which ones aren't stupid without looking into how they're used and the practicality of them. But ultimately, like justifying something as good because it's a law is dumb, right? I think you're not seeing the artificiality of these laws in the first place, and the fact that fallible humans, again, to bring it back to the slavery example, that was a law at one point, which it was obviously a stupid law, but like justifying its validity via saying it's a law is a really dumb circular argument. So they're artificial. So I think the hardest question would be assuming that all boundaries of any kind, ethical, legal, whatever, boundaries are all artificial, social boundaries, whatever, they're artificial, which ones are useful or which ones are good or which ones serve a function that is, in alignment with the interests of humanity. Because I even think it's difficult to start saying good and bad because they're gray ultimately. So it's kind of impossible to say which one's good or bad, but which ones enable the flourishing of humanity, which again might seem like I'm just saying good in different ways, but I think there is kind of a difference between like enabling human flourishment versus good. So maybe there's just more of a tangible argument to be had on that basis. So I don't know. It's difficult to quantify that. It's difficult to quantify anything. And that's maybe why laws exist in the first place. But it frustrates me when people justify things as good or bad because it's illegal. And that's why I don't like, oh, he's a criminal because he broke a law. Okay, well, what law did he break? I'm not just going to say he's a criminal because he broke a law. There's a lot of laws that you probably should break under circumstances, like whistleblower laws and things like that are dumb and implemented poorly. A la the Snowden case. He's a criminal apparently, but if you look at what he did, do I consider him a criminal? No, but of course the law says he's a criminal, but at a certain point, then I don't live via like the laws as my laws. So there's just your laws that you made up. Sure, most of my laws align with your laws, but not all of them. So don't impose the legality of things as an ethical standard, because then soon enough, before you know it, you're endorsing like, I don't know, horrible things that private companies do under like the law, right? So I feel like it's stupid to justify that as well. So I don't know. I think viewing everything as artificial barriers is helpful, but then the difficult part would be to discern where these artificial barriers are barriers. And I think it largely looms on the individual to do that, and not like this legal system. Only because you have actors that work on both ends of human flourishing and the opposite of human flourishing. And I think making them, I don't know, I think the responsibility kind of has to fall on an individual to implement and discern between those two, because it's just too hard, especially with 7 billion people or whatever, to agree on anything. I mean, even with like 10 people, like you can't even agreeing to go where to eat is like an impossible task. So much less like what's right and wrong. It just seems insane. So at a certain point, there's like what enables some kind of cooperation between individuals. as the litmus test of what's good and bad, because laws can't really be good and bad at a certain point. They just have to be, reasonable. And I don't know, maybe that's just why regulations things exist. But the other really point against all of it is that just trying to make systems as small as possible makes them easier to manage versus allowing things to balloon out of control, and then you're left with these enormous systems that are impossible to control in any way, and then it's just all a mess. So anyway, I'll pinch it off for today, but I will probably try to dissect these topics in more detail next time, because I feel like I left a lot of loose ends this time. But anyway, thanks for watching. Peace out, and I'll see you next time.